Hello everybody, and welcome to my first of two videos on this, the Nikon EM. The Nikon EM is a 35mm interchangeable lens SLR. Now what that means is that it can take any 35mm film you would like to put in it. The lenses can be taken off and put on, swapped out, anytime that you're not taking a photo without it affecting the images at all. And it has a single lens. Come on. There we go. A single lens. And the light from the lens passes through a reflex housing to the viewfinder eyepiece before you take a photo. Before we get any further, just realized I need to take off this motor drive. It's not really part of the camera. That might look a little bit more like what you're used to seeing. The Nikon EM has a center-weighted meter. What that means is that if what you're seeing right now represented the image that you're going to take, the central 12 millimeters of your viewfinder, which are an area about the size of this lens right here, would represent the majority of the metering information, with everything else around it providing the balance. Generally with Nikon, it's about 60-40, but I couldn't find that for certain with this camera. Or maybe I just missed it when I read the manual. Either way, the shutter speeds with this camera are bulb, M90, which is manual 90, and automatic. Automatic is 1 second up to 1/1000th of a second. And other than that, in automatic mode, this is just aperture priority. You set the aperture on the camera's lens in automatic mode, and the camera will pick the best shutter speed for you. There's also a secret hidden shutter speed. If you have no batteries in the camera, in auto mode, it will shoot at approximately 1/1000th of a second. If you have no batteries, you can also still use M90. And I believe you can also use bulb. Yes, you can. So 1/1000th, 1/90th, and bulb. So without batteries, you still have some limited ability to take photos with this camera. The viewfinder magnification right here is 0.86x, and it has 92% viewfinder coverage. Now what that means, 0.86x means that what you see in the viewfinder is 86% of the size of the image that's going to reach your film plane. So it just reduces it a little bit. 92% frame coverage means that if what you're looking at right now is what's going to be on your negative when you get it back from the lab, then about 4% on each side and 4% on the top and the bottom will be in your image, but not in your viewfinder. And that just means you can compose your image very closely, fill the frame completely, and still have a little bit of room to move your image around either in digital editing or in the darkroom, to still have a composition that is what you wanted. It uses a Nikon Type K fixed, non-removable focusing screen with a split prism. The flash sync speed on this camera is 1/90th of a second in M90. I believe you can also use the flash in bulb mode. And as a fun fact, this was designed by Giorgetto Giugiaro, the Italian car designer, and it was designed to look very sleek. And I would argue that by 80s standards, it is kind of a sleek looking camera, I won't lie. The target market for the Nikon EM was the entry-level user. Basically, this was an attempt, and it was not even masked, to attract female photographers from point-and-shoot and bridge cameras into the SLR market. They went to great lengths for that. So it was openly marketed by Nikon as a woman's camera early on in the marketing run for this, by the way. Is designed to be easily used and nice to look at, so as much a fashion accessory as a good photographic tool. Just as a side note, for those of you watching this in 2022 when I filmed this and beyond, who might not have experienced the world in the early 1980s, late 1970s, it was a lot different back then. Yes, we're just going to leave it at that. Ultimately, the EM and later cameras, which would have been the FG and the FG20, did not really sell that well. And also, as a drawback, they had the effect of lessening the perception of the Nikon brand with its core professional and very high-end photographic users. Because why is this prestigious brand marketing to entry-level users? What is this about? That is the business of other brands. So, didn't sell well, hurt their brand perception. So even though it's a fine camera and it's a good aperture priority shooting camera, just like, say, the Pentax ME has basically the exact same capabilities as this camera does, it does really go to show the importance of knowing your audience and your market's perception of your product before going to launch. This was produced by Nikon in Japan from 1979 until 1982. It was preceded by nothing directly, as this was the first of the 3 entry-level SLRs that Nikon designed in this vein. It was concurrent with the FM, FE, F2, and F3, and it was followed by the FG, which was a direct successor to this camera, inarguably. The FG is a significantly better camera in terms of capabilities. If you're looking at this and evaluating this, the FG and the FG20, I have videos on those other 2 cameras already. The FG is the best of the 3, by far. So now as we do, let's go over this camera's features and talk about what everything is. In the second video, we'll talk about what everything does. So technically on the front here, but we're going to start with these. These are the strap lugs that you can connect your camera strap to. This is your film rewind knob and lever that you will use to rewind your film when you're done with it. This is your ASA setting dial, and to select ASA, by the way, it's exactly the same as ISO. So if you set this at 400 ASA, that is exactly the same as 400 ISO on your modern film. ISO, when they took over the film speed ratings, just adopted the ASA and the DIN numbers. So you can just use the ASA and ISO exactly. But to adjust it, you just lift up on the ring and adjust it to whatever you want it to be after you load your roll of film. We'll see that in video 2. Flash hot shoe. This is your battery check button, battery check lamp, film advance lever right here, just like that. Oh, that is a bit dusty. It's been a while since I got this to make the video on it. Shutter release button, shutter mode selector switch right here, frame count window. On the front of the camera, we have the self-timer dial right here. There we go. The nice thing about this camera, as you can see, is it stops down the lens and lifts up the mirror prior. Well, you couldn't see the mirror go up, but you'll have to trust me on that. And lifted up the mirror prior to the shutter action, which helps to make the image more stable. You can see that here again. Lifts up the mirror. Lens mount, lens mounting index, aperture coupling ring right here. That's on top of the lens mount. Lens release button, exposure compensation button right over here. On the back of the camera, not a whole lot to see, but we've got the viewfinder window right here and the box top holder, so that when you get your box of film, you tear the top off, you slide it into this little holder right here. You know what type of film is in your camera, serial number. And then on the viewfinder, we also have a couple of grooves here for some accessories like diopter adjusters or right angle viewfinders, eye cups, things like that. On the bottom of the camera, we have the mechanical coupling for the MDE Film Advance motor drive, film rewind button right there, tripod socket, battery chamber. We'll see how to change the batteries in the second video. Made in Japan. Electronic contacts for the MDE motor drive. To get inside the camera, what we do is we're going to lift up on the film release knob right here, film rewind knob, and that pops open the film back. Here we have the film cassette chamber. These silver rails are guide rails, and what they do is as the film comes out of the film cassette, these rails keep it flat and moving smoothly through the camera. Shutter. Film tension sprocket right here. These cogs or gears or teeth, whatever you want to call them, whichever word is the correct one. That's why I'm not a mechanical engineer. Engage the sprocket holes on the film and help pull it through the camera as the film is advanced. Film take-up spool right there. Over here we have the film pressure plate. This keeps pressure on the film when it's up against the shutter so that it's flat and moves smoothly through the camera and images are properly focused on it. And then this little retaining spring right here is used to keep the cassette properly aligned inside the camera so that the film exits it smoothly and in proper alignment. So some tips for this camera, as I mentioned, you have the 1/1000th-ish shutter speed with no batteries in this camera if you need to use that, so there is that hidden shutter speed. In terms of simple aperture priority shooting, this camera is it. There are very few cameras that were made that really strip down the aperture priority shooting experience to its most basic and fundamental levels, and this is probably the best of them. The competition I can think of would be the AV1, which I think this is a better camera than as well. The Pentax, that's the Canon AV1. The Pentax ME, which I would also argue this is a better camera than in general. Also, I think looks better than both of those. So there are a couple of others, but realistically, if you're looking for an aperture priority automatic camera, this is very possibly your best bet. And one other thing, this camera came out with the release of the Nikon Series E lenses, which were affordable, smaller, lower spec versions of their Nikkor counterparts. Interestingly, this 50mm 1.8 went on to be one of the most well-regarded budget lenses ever made, and I believe that the optical formula for this was adopted into later higher-end Nikon lenses. Don't quote me on that, I'm going off memory. Do not have that written down. Anyway, some things not to do with this camera. You don't want to store it in a plastic bag or box because you can get moisture permeating that plastic, and unless you have a very, very good desiccant pack in there that you keep recharged, it has to be rechargeable. It's not the desiccant pack from, you know, your beef jerky or whatever. Unless you have that desiccant pack in there, you can get fungus growing on your optics, and that's never a good situation. Don't store this with the shutter ready to fire. So whenever you're ready to put it in the box, make sure that you trigger the shutter before you do that. And that's because this shutter still has mechanical components in it. It's not like a 90s camera that is all electronic. So you want to take the stress off those mechanical components so they don't develop a memory and function incorrectly with time. Don't touch the mirror in this camera. Don't touch the shutter if you can at all avoid it, because those are both good ways to damage your camera significantly. Don't let your camera get wet. The Nikon EM is not weather sealed, and water getting into the electronics will cause some significant problems, potentially even ruining a Nikon EM. And just remember, your Nikon EM is a precision tool that should be handled with care and respect. As long as you take care of your camera will take care of you. Thank you everyone for watching. If this video was helpful and useful to you, please give me a thumbs up. That lets me know that I'm on the right track and that I'm producing and creating content which is helpful to you. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, please leave those in the comments section below. I'm pretty good about responding every couple of days and answering whatever questions you have to the best of my ability. If you'd like to subscribe to find out when I have more videos about how to use cameras, photographic techniques, or the best practices for the tools of the trade, by all means please subscribe and check that notifications bell to be alerted when new content arrives. If you'd like to support the channel by joining with a membership, there are now membership options for this channel at different tiers that will give you different benefits if you would be interested in that. And one last thing, thank you everyone very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next videos. Won't we, Steinbeck? What's that look about?